Hello everyone. Today we are doing Leetcode 2169, number of steps to obtain 0. So let's have a look at what the problem statement says. It's an easy question. It says you're given two non-negative integers, num1 and num2. Now in one operation, if num1 is greater than or equals to num2, so for example, a case which is like this, num1 is greater than num2, or they can be equal as well. You must subtract num2 from num1. So what you must do is you must sort of take the bigger number and subtract the smaller number from it, so you get 1, and then you will update num1 and num2 will remain as is. So if num1 is greater than or equals to num2, you must subtract num2 from num1, otherwise subtract num1 from num2. So you're always basically taking the bigger number first and subtracting the smaller number from it. And they're giving another sort of example. So if num1, let's say, was 5 and num2 was 4, then you must have had to do 5 minus 4 equals 1. This would become 1 and this will remain 4. Then again, what you are seeing is nums2 is now greater than nums1, so you will do 4 minus 1, that is going to become 3. So this is going to remain as is, this is going to become 3. And then you will do, 3 minus 1, so this will remain 2. Then you will do 2 minus 1. Then as soon as both of these are equal, again this condition gets met. Num1 is actually equals to num2. So in this scenario, in the next step, num1 is going to become 0, right? And that is when the process ends. Return the number of operations required to make either num1 equals 0 or num2 equals 0. So if we revisit our previous example, in this scenario, first we did 3 minus 2 equals 1. So this was our first step. In the second step, what I'll do is I will subtract 2 minus 1 equals 1. So both of them become equal. And in the third step, again, this condition gets met. So num1 is going to become 0, and therefore the answer of the first test case is 0. Let me actually show you what the test cases are. The first test case says that num1 is 2, num2 is 3. So the answer of this output is of this test case is 3. And then in example number 2, both the number 1 and number 2 are they're both equal to each other. So there's just one step that you need to do. You just need to subtract num2 from num1, and then you directly get a 0, right? So this is a very simple question, in terms that you just need to simulate what the question does. You don't have to uh, think about anything extra or anything. So what we'll do is we'll stick with example number 1, and we'll think of how we can take it into our approach, right? So let me just draw it up real quick. So num1 is 2, and then num2 is 3. So the first thing that I need to do is I need to see which of these two numbers is the bigger one, right? And then always make sure it doesn't really matter whether I'm turning this into a 0 or whether I'm turning this into a 0. That doesn't really matter. What really matters is you want any one of them to become 0. So you just need to observe which one is the larger one, right? So we can initialize a variable as answer. Basically means however many steps we are taking in order to make sure that one of those two numbers reach 0, right? Then what should I do? I need to see if num1 is greater than equals to num2, right? So there will be some logic over here, and in the opposite case, it's going to be like num1 is less than num2. So basically num2 is greater than num1, right? And I need to do this in a loop while num1 is not equals to 0 or num2 is not equals to 0. If any one of them reaches 0, if any one of them becomes equals to 0, uh, the condition is going to break. Should this be or um, and I think, right? While num1 is not equals to 0 and num2 is not equals to 0. So if any one of them becomes 0, we'll drop out of the loop, right? Okay, let me wrap this up and let me also beautify this, format the code. So yeah, perfect. Then what I, if num1 is greater than equals to num2, then I need to say make num1 equals to num1 minus num2, right? Otherwise update num2, make it equals to num2 minus num1, and I think that is it. And after each step I'll increment answer and return the answer from here. So if I run this code, let's see if it passes the example test cases. It does, and if I submit it, it gets accepted, right? So pretty simple. And if you think about the time and space complexity over here, in the code that we have written, we are just taking one variable as extra space, so that's constant space, and then we are using a while loop over here. So at maximum how many operations can it take? At maximum it can take 10 to the power 5 operations. Even if you are, it's not going to go in that sort of complexity, but at the very 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 worst case, impossible worst case, it's going to take 10 to the power 5 operations. So that's O of n, which is completely acceptable, right? So this was it from today, and I will see you next time.